Atheists sometimes say that Christianity has done far too much bad to be considered a legitimate candidate for truth. Corruption in the church, abuse, the Crusades, or other religious wars, all these, according to the skeptic, make it kind of impossible to believe or even take seriously the Christian faith. In this video, I will respond to this objection and show why things are really not as simple as the skeptic would like them to be. This is Lucas from Deflate, countering the skeptic's objections to Christianity. If you're new here, click that subscribe button to get our upcoming videos. Let me start by saying that I don't deny that some things have gone terribly wrong in the history of Christianity. Yes, people have gone to war with crosses painted on their shields. Yes, there is corruption in religious institutions. And yes, religious authority figures do at times abuse their power. And so it would be rather delusional to say that nothing bad has ever happened in the name of religion. However, it is just as delusional to claim that faith in God is the cause of all or of the worst suffering in human history. That, however, is exactly the line of reasoning advanced by the most prominent atheists. Take, for example, the late Christopher Hitchens, who said that religion poisons everything. Or Sam Harris, who wants to make us believe that the most monstrous crimes against humanity have invariably been inspired by unjustified belief. Really? I mean, these are rather far-reaching claims. And remember, it's atheists who usually rehearse the mantra that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. So what is the evidence offered by Harris and Hitchens? Well, nothing. Nothing but personal rants and a few cherry-picked stories from history books, that is. But solid data supporting their wishful thinking is completely absent from their work. And the reason for this is quite simple. The populist preaching of Harris and Hitchens is not supported by actual facts. Take, for example, the Encyclopedia of Wars, consisting of 3 massive volumes that document 1,763 wars from 8000 BC to 2003. That is over 10,000 years of human history. Of these, only 123 are counted as religious conflicts, which is less than 7%. Or take a study conducted by political scientist Robert Woodbury, who published his findings in 2012 in an award-winning article in the American Political Science Review. He concluded that areas significantly impacted by Protestant missionaries in the past are on average more economically developed today, with comparatively better health, lower infant mortality, lower corruption, greater literacy, higher educational attainment, especially for women, and more robust membership in non-governmental associations. Now, these are just 2 examples of peer-reviewed studies which offer real data, as opposed to Hitchens and Harris, who are content to follow their own confirmation bias rather than the evidence wherever it leads. The reason for their intentional blindness is obvious. It's because the actual evidence demonstrates that the religion poisons everything soundbite is simply out of tune with actual history. Anyway, the notion that the Christian worldview is illegitimate or even wrong because of the bad that has been done in its name is absurd for a couple of reasons. First, let's apply the same line of reasoning to science. Science has given us all sorts of awesome things, such as computer processors, vaccines, or medical instrumentation, or airplanes. But science has also given us fighter jets, chemical weapons, the atomic bomb, and the most horrific torture methods ever devised. Now, would any rational thinking person therefore pick up on Hitchens' pseudo-wisdom and claim that science poisons everything? I don't think so. Second, you have to evaluate the validity of an idea based on its own merits, no matter how the proponents of an idea act. In other words, the fact that Christians don't succeed all the time in living by Christian standards simply has no bearing on the question whether the standards themselves are valid or true. Third, and this is probably the single most important thing, what is the underlying reasoning that gives you even the possibility to criticize Christians for their hypocrisy and the wrong they've done? It's Christianity's own moral standards of right and wrong. In other words, Whenever atheists accuse the church of being corrupt or Christians for not being loving or compassionate, the thing that makes such criticism possible in the first place is the fact that there's a reference point for comparison. And this reference point is the Christian standard of morality: love for the neighbor, love for the enemy, forgiveness, and self-sacrifice. Now, if we were to look at the bad stuff committed by atheists, what would be our measuring stick against which atheism is to be held accountable? This is where it gets really interesting. For starters, we face the problem that in atheism it's impossible to uphold a standard of objective right and wrong, because no one has the ultimate say as to what that standard would be. Similarly, if there is no God, the notion of good and evil doesn't make sense, as Richard Dawkins himself admits when he says that in our universe we find at bottom no design, no purpose, no evil, no good, nothing but blind, pitiless indifference. In other words, Dawkins is telling us that the notion of good and the notion of evil, as well as the idea that there is a distinction between the two, is false. This essentially means that nothing is right, nothing is wrong, and that everything is permitted because everything is equally pointless. But with that, atheism basically erodes away the very ground on which one could evaluate what has happened in its name. Laying all that aside for a moment, let's apply that stick we've been talking about to atheism. Let's look at the Soviet Union, for example, whose genocidal atheist leader Stalin helped establish the League of Militant Atheists, and who tortured, killed and starved to death around 20 million people. Or Mao Zedong, who, while attempting to rid China of religious belief, boasted of burying 46,000 people alive among the approximately 70 million he killed in labor camps, executions, or otherwise. Besides this, and it's more than enough already, the list of atrocities committed in the name of atheist ideology goes on and on and on, amounting to a total of around 100 million deaths in the 20th century alone. Of course, any sane person would react by saying this shouldn't have happened. But here's the thing. We can say this shouldn't have happened if we assume that God has imposed a moral order of right and wrong on the universe. But we can't say this shouldn't have happened if we assume atheism to be true, because in atheism there is only blind, pitiless indifference, remember? All of this boils down to the following. The wrong that has been done in the name of Christianity can be called out because Christianity can be held accountable to the standard inherent in its own worldview. But while there have been all sorts of atrocities committed in the name of atheism, atheism itself doesn't even allow you to say that these things are wrong. But the story doesn't end here, for when you take a look back at history and ponder all the bad stuff that has happened, regardless of who is responsible for it, you also have to step back and ask yourself a much more fundamental question. How did you get where we are today? How did we come to actually regard these things as bad? How did we come to have something like the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which affirms the recognition of the inherent dignity and of the equal and inalienable rights of all members of the human family? It will probably come as a surprise to you that atheist thinkers, that is, actual philosophers, not self-assigned preachers like Harris or Hitchens, credit the Judeo-Christian heritage for that. Plenty of atheists who actually study the data are happy to admit that the idea of the dignity, sanctity, and equality of all human beings is rooted in the Judeo-Christian worldview. Take, for example, atheist philosopher Jürgen Habermas, who says, egalitarian universalism, from which sprang the ideas of freedom and a social solidarity, of an autonomous conduct of life and emancipation, the individual morality of conscience, human rights, and democracy is the direct heir to the Judaic ethic of justice and the Christian ethic of love. Likewise, the famed Jacques Derrida tells us that the concept of crime against humanity is a Christian concept, and I think there would be no such thing in the law today without the Christian heritage, the Abrahamic heritage, the biblical heritage. Finally, the late Richard Rorty, an atheist philosopher from Princeton, admitted, Secular liberals like myself are effectively freeloading atheists. We continue to rely on the Judeo-Christian legacy of human dignity, despite the fact that we reject the revealed truth that could support that concern. So let me say again that I wouldn't deny that there are indeed dark chapters in the history of the church. But as I said in the beginning, the issue of the bad that has happened in the name of Christianity is far more complex than the atheist would like you to think. Because you likewise can't deny, as atheists themselves tell us, that it's the moral order of the Judeo-Christian worldview which has laid the ideological foundation in the West and beyond for human well-being. And it's this very foundation which allows us to have a conversation in the first place about what has gone wrong. In contrast, atheism offers neither standard nor measuring stick, nothing but blind, pitiless indifference towards everything that has happened and will happen, both good and bad. And last but not least, what many people aren't aware of is that Jesus constantly called out the religious leaders of his day for their corruption, lack of compassion, and their hunger for wealth and power instead of truth. What is more, it was that criticism which got Jesus killed. So those who criticize the Christian religion based on its moral misfiring have, ironically enough, much more in common with its founder than they realize. Thank you guys for watching. Do leave your comments below in the comment section and hopefully see you in the next episode. Bye.